I'm a big fan of kind of incorporating a deeper purpose to your health journey. So really diving deeper into people's psychology of like, why do you want to lose weight? Well, maybe some people have some surface level goals, but usually if you really go deeper, a lot of people can anchor themselves to a bigger vision.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. We have a very special treat for you today. Ryan, who is our guest today, who I'm going to tell you a little bit more about, he has been recommended to me by probably like a dozen different people in a friend group that I have, a group that I'm involved in with a lot of my friends, kind of a little mastermind group. And everyone's like, yeah, Ryan Kennedy. Have you heard of Ryan? Ryan says this, Ryan says that. I'm like, who is this guy? I gotta talk to this guy. So, and for me to hear about someone that many times like that and have such praise be said about him every time I hear about him is pretty incredible. Does not happen very often. So Ryan Kennedy, he's a functional medicine practitioner, traditional naturopath, and a board certified clinical nutritionist who helps people improve their health through lifestyle and dietary changes. He's passionate about educating his patients to make the proper modifications to their lifestyle to avoid and reverse obesity and weight gain, depression, fatigue, digestive issues, hormone imbalances, and chronic diseases. Unlike conventional medicine, Ryan doesn't address symptoms, but rather uses natural approaches to support and enhance your body's ability to heal. That's what I really love talking to people about that. And so Ryan's holistic approach utilizes the best and most appropriate techniques to help you feel and function at your best. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Grateful to be here, man.
Awesome. So let's jump right into it real quick. You work with a lot of clients. You see a lot of different types of patients. People. I actually heard you on another podcast talking about mental health, and you were giving advice about how the lifestyle and dietary changes can help people avoid depression. You've helped people with weight loss. You've helped friends that I know increase their testosterone. So there's so many different directions we could go here. What are some of the in terms of like how you normally work with clients? Where do you start? Where does that process start?
So it very much depends on the person because everyone comes in with different goals, different health status at the moment, and different things that they're looking to focus on. But I really love to start by addressing and establishing really good morning routine because that really primes your mind and body for the day, really sets you up to be in a state energetically to make a lot of good choices because it is really challenging when you wake up, start scrolling on your phone, you're feeling lousy, you're over caffeinated just to kind of get through your day. And by the time you get to lunch or dinner, you're not in the best headspace to make good choices when it comes to nutrition. And you're not in the best headspace to, get your training in and do some physical activity and be a good partner and a good person to your friends and family. And all these things are really kind of just a chain reaction based on all the other choices we've made. And so I love starting and talking about that. And then there's a lot of kind of fundamental things I like to check off based on the person, going through hydration, going through sleep, going through a lot of things that you could really dial in the best nutrition plan. You could dial in a lot of supplements, all these things that are really helpful and really powerful tools, but it's exponentially more difficult if someone's, sleep deprived to eat well and to get their, blood sugar stability right and to help, with weight loss. It's freaking hard if you're only sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night and you're not getting quality rest. And similarly, man, if you're really in a place where mentally you're not ready to change or you don't have the right mental frameworks to really instill a lot of these different habits and routines, it's something that's also a good place to where I start with patients because that drives a lot of the, a lot of their success. Really the compliance is one of the biggest things with any practitioner, any clinician, any coach is how can we get the person you're working with to make these changes in a way that's sustainable, that works for them, that they learn to enjoy, because that's really that's really where it's at.
Yeah. And you and I just kind of touched on it before we started recording is like, people, it's not hard to, although there is a lot of different health advice out there too, but I guess for you and I, the health advice that we know, it's not like rocket science, but so if everyone knows, what to do, why aren't they doing it, right? And I'm not convinced everyone knows exactly what to do, but once you do know what to do, why is there so much non-compliance? So that whole psychology of health is always very fascinating to me. So I definitely want to touch on that. Definitely want to touch on morning routines. I also know that you do a lot of individualized, like personalized, like even when I was kind of asking a couple questions, you're like, well, it all depends on the person, and this test result and that test result, which I really like because I'm finding that it's not a one size fits all. So what kind of let's give a brief overview, and maybe we'll go into more detail later. What are some of the what are you testing for with patients when they come on board with you?
Yeah, so one of the tests I run most commonly, in addition to blood work, is a functional medicine lab called an organic acids test. Most people have never heard of this. And it's a test that's measuring all these different metabolites that can give you a really accurate picture of a whole bunch of imbalances and systems in the body that really complements blood work well. So when someone goes in for blood labs, it's common to get CBC, complete blood count,
Mm-hmm.
a metabolic panel. We're looking at blood sugar, lipid profile, liver enzymes, kidney function, all the standard things you would expect. And that's all really good data. But 9 times out of 10, when someone has an issue, those numbers still look pretty good. And
Mm.
they're still within the quote unquote normal range. And, a lot of times the physician they're seeing, the medical doctor will say, hey, there's nothing wrong. And, oftentimes just kind of dismiss some of the things that they have going on, whether it's digestive issues or fatigue or headaches or any number of challenges people suffer from. And so this test is really looking kind of at a deeper level. And it's not measuring those things you get from blood work. It's really looking at different imbalances in the microbiome. So it's helping to diagnose certain things like candida overgrowth,
Mm.
small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, Clostridia bacteria that can be really pathogenic and cause things like IBS and all sorts of other irritable bowel problems.
Mm.
And a lot of times that's kind of where I like to start because it'll give us a very clear picture. And it gives me as a clinician the data to say, okay, this person in front of me has excess of yeast and fungus, and that's what's causing their bloating and gas and, feeling lousy after meals and brain fog. And, then I know exactly what herbs and what probiotics and what kind of protocol I'm going to put them on because I have the idea of exactly what their body needs, what's going on in their gut.
Mm.
And the reason I like the organic acids as well is because it measures a whole bunch of different systems. So in addition to gut health and different imbalances in the microbiome, it's also looking at your sensitivity to oxalic acid. Oxalates being a plant chemical defense system found in, leafy greens and certain nuts and seeds. And a lot of people are eating a quote unquote what they think is a very healthy diet, big ass salads and having a lot of like almond butter and Brazil nuts. And not that these foods are inherently harmful, but they're not healthy for everyone. And if you're not able to break down this oxalic acid that's found in these foods, it can start to bind to calcium in the body and create these crystalline structures that can lead to symptoms like gout and joint pain and even kidney stones. And so I find that's really helpful to see, hey, are you able to metabolize the oxalates? Because if not, we want to put you on a low oxalate diet. And I've seen tremendous benefits for so many
Mm.
people. And then it looks at your mitochondria. So it's measuring different stages of the Krebs cycle and these metabolites involved with energy production. So we can see if someone needs to be on mitochondria support to help enhance their natural energy systems. And it looks at neurotransmitters. So it's measuring your dopamine, your serotonin, norepinephrine and epinephrine to see what imbalances you have in your neurochemicals. So a lot of people that are feeling low motivation may need some dopamine support and precursors that can help support that process. Similarly, people who are dealing with some depression might need some amino acids and certain targeted herbs or nutrients to support that serotonin production. So it gives us that data as well. And then it looks at a whole bunch of your vitamins, looks at your amino acids, mineral metabolism. So it's like 80 markers, man. It's really a good kind of big picture overlook of like where the imbalances lie and what really is going to move the needle for the individual that we run the test with. So that's one of my favorites. I'll
That's really
also
good.
do.
Is that a urine test then? The organic acids test?
That's correct. So it's an at-home urine test, really easy, real simple. And that's another thing people love. Not everyone likes blood work in that you have
Yeah.
to get your, the blood draw and go to a lab and it starts to become a little more tedious. So I like at-home tests for this reason.
Mhm.
I'll also run stool sometimes to do a more comprehensive gut analysis,
Mhm.
especially depending on the person and their symptoms and what they've kind of had going on, how long it's been going on, what they've tried. because sometimes I work with individuals that are pretty advanced with their knowledge of health, and they've seen many practitioners, they've seen different specialists, they're taking all these different great supplements, their diet's really clean, yet they still have these really debilitating digestive problems. So for that person, we might want to go a level deeper into seeing what's going on in the gut, because it may not be as simple as someone that's just starting out on their journey, that hasn't really seen anyone in the functional medicine space. So it also, that plays into it as well. It's really looking at the whole workup, the whole picture, and really talking to the person. And that's the thing I like about functional medicine and the way I run my practice, Tyler, is that I speak with people for an hour. We're not rushing through this like 6-7 minute procedure where it's just on to the next one. The way the insurance model is based in our modern medical system, it just doesn't give practitioners enough time to really figure out, what's going on. And so I really like to go deep and do a full case history and really see what's this person's doing, so that it kind of formulates this picture. Because, medicine is both an art and a science, and you got to really figure out what's going on in order to help the person to the greatest degree.
Yeah. That's really good, man. I mean, I agree. I think it's going to be, when they say, like, when you look back 50 years, like some of the things you're like, wow, I can't believe people actually did that or thought that was healthy or whatever.
Yep.
I think in 50 years from now, they're going to look back and they're like, so you guys just didn't even get tested? Like, you didn't even know what your levels were? Like, you just
Yeah.
like took someone's advice without even knowing what you were low or high in and your levels, and
Mhm.
and it's going to be archaic in the future. So I think it's something everyone needs to do. I don't hear very many people talk about organic acid tests, that's for sure. Stool tests, you've heard, some people talk about it, but I haven't heard of people using it much in conjunction. I've heard of some of the ones where it's only a stool test and you ship in that, and that's only one little data point, and then
Yep.
they're giving you food recommendations based off of that, which is only one piece of the puzzle. So I really like what you're doing. So in an ideal world, you have the organic acids, you have a stool test, you have a blood test. Any others that you think are ones that people should be getting for?
So again, it depends. And with a
Mhm.
comprehensive blood test, I'll usually look at hormones, so you don't have to run that separately. I'll also look at certain things like thyroid and other markers that will kind of, with that and the organic acids, it really does paint a pretty good picture for the vast majority of individuals. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes I will run, like a hair minerals and metals test to really see if there's any heavy metal exposure and what's going on there, especially if someone has symptoms to indicate they might have an overload of some of these different toxins, like chronic headaches and other things that are really kind of a sign that, hey, maybe we want to take a deeper look. And then other things like food sensitivity tests, and there's so much testing. And one thing, dude, that I've noticed as well is I like to start with a couple of the foundational things, start to
Yeah.
implement some effective protocols, start to build some momentum, and then based on our results, based on the amount of resolution that we're getting, then we could always look for deeper testing. But I'm not one of those guys too that's like, all right, let's run $5,000 worth of all these crazy tests, because oftentimes don't need that level of
Yeah.
testing. You want some good data to get a good
Yeah.
idea of how what's going to be best to get started. But then a lot of times you can also just tell based on patient feedback and their subjective opinion of like, hey, I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling that way. And if people are feeling freaking fantastic, you don't need a piece of paper from a lab company to
Right.
confirm we're seeing some great benefits here.
Yeah. I'm probably one of the crazy ones. I might ask you about getting every and any test. I'll be one of the crazy
Yeah.
ones, but for most people, yeah. And I agree with you though too, because if you try to implement a million changes at one time based on a million test results, right, you're never even going to know, what worked or what the problem
100%.
was.
And it could
So
just be overwhelming and a lot to change all at once. Because one of the things that we touched on was just the behavior change aspect. I really like to attack some of the what I call low hanging fruit, like
yeah.
the things that are really going to be big needle movers right off the bat. But I don't try and give people 45 recommendations day one, because then it does just become overwhelming and it becomes really exhausting and people just feel so scattered. So I like to start with a few key priorities. And then every time I meet with patients for consultations, we add layers to those protocols, to that foundation, so that it's really brought in a systematic and incremental way. So it doesn't
Mhm.
feel like you're doing this complete 180 in your life. And you don't have to think, oh my God, I got to do this, and this, then I got to do more of this. And it quickly starts to become just overloading for a lot of individuals.
Yeah. Good point. Um, So let's see which so many different directions we could go to here. Well, actually, while you touched on you I heard you talk about this once before with oxalates, right? Which is why you do the organic acids testing, right? One of the many reasons, I assume.
Yep.
And so oxalates is something that it's been a little controversial, right? And I heard something I think that you said that some people might find controversial, right? About spinach and kale being potentially not being health foods, right? Talk a little bit
Mhm.
about that real quick.
I mean, this is something I always blows people's minds because
Right.
they're preached as the holy grail of nutrition. Even in my postgraduate studies on nutrition, everyone talks about dark leafy greens being just the best thing
Mhm.
for humans from a nutrition perspective. And what I found over my years in clinical practice, and I've even seen this in my own body personally, is that there's no one food that's healthy for everyone. Like we all have different,
Mhm, mhm.
uniqueness, but I find that some of these foods, like spinach and kale, actually aren't great for a large percentage of people. And when they cut them out, they tend to feel much better. And when
Mm.
you look at the nutrient density, which is really identifying how many vitamins, minerals, micronutrients are in this food per calorie, per unit of energy, leafy greens come back really high because they are so low in their caloric load. They're not very calorie
Got it.
dense. So when you
Mm.
make that ratio, you can say accurately, dark leafy greens are incredibly nutrient dense. But when you look at it in more practical terms, like how much of these vitamins, minerals are actually in a cup or two of kale or spinach, it's pretty unimpressive, to be quite frank, especially when you compare it to a lot of the other nutrient dense foods coming from the animal kingdom. So when you
Mhm.
compare it to grass-fed meats and different organ meats and different types of fats and eggs and wild caught fish and all these other foods that I'm a big proponent of, you're not getting a whole lot from the leafy greens in that perspective. And so I do like to look at oxalates because yeah, it does tend to be a hidden factor, especially for a lot of people that have already made a lot of good nutrition changes. They're not eating ultra processed food. They're not consuming all these grains and other types of refined sugars and omega-6 vegetable oils and shitty inflammatory fats. They've already made a lot of good changes, but they're still having certain issues, whether it's chronic inflammation that's representative as back pain, or they're having problems that indicate, hey, I think there's something in the diet that's driving this. That's when we really start to look at some of these other plant foods that are supposedly really healthy, but can sometimes backfire in certain individuals.
Yeah, and the spinach and kale, I think specifically if they're not cooked, right, they can be extremely high in oxalates, right?
So the cooking process, if you were to saute it or steam it, does decrease the oxalic acid load. So it's definitely more helpful, especially to be able to adequately digest it and to have a lower propensity of issues compared to if you're making these green smoothies where you're just putting handfuls of kale in this kale
Yeah.
smoothie and thinking you're doing something amazing for your body. More often than not, even if you don't have a huge issue with oxalates, I find people just feel better not having all that roughage. And that's another thing that I think is worth touching on is plant fiber gets again proposed as this amazing thing for humans. Like we need a lot of fibrous foods. Fiber is a double-edged sword, man. Some people do great with it, and it is very helpful as prebiotics for your microbiome, but it's very rough on the intestines. And so when I'm working with someone that has an inflammatory issue like IBS, IBD, I find limiting their fiber is actually a very effective strategy, and mainly using cooked vegetables, not raw, because it doesn't aggravate the intestines as much and they don't experience the same level of issues. Um, and so that's another thing that's just, there's a lot of
Interesting. That's
caveats.
very counterintuitive there, right? Usually people are like gut issue, fiber, fiber, fiber,
Yes,
right? More
yes,
fiber. Um,
100%.
interesting. Interesting. Um, cool. So let's see. So many different ways we can go here. So you did mention about morning routines and the importance of it, and so let's talk about some of those because I know you have a lot of good stuff that you share on morning routine.
It's an absolutely incredibly important aspect to kickstarting the day off right, because it sets you up for how you're going to sleep that night. A lot of people that have sleep challenges, it's you can't just go to bed and do all the wrong things throughout the morning, throughout the day, and then expect to sleep like a champ. Some people are lucky and are able to, but most of us need to really set ourselves up for success. Same thing with our energy levels throughout the day. So three of the top things on a broad level: one is light. So getting morning sunlight when the sun is at a low solar angle. Now, I've been talking about this for, gosh, almost a decade now, and it's become really more popularized with guys like Andrew Huberman and a whole bunch of others in the space that are, sharing the truth that like getting outside for morning sunlight with no sunglasses on, you don't have to stare at the sun, but just being outside and getting that light in through the eyes is so freaking essential for activating all these different neurochemical and metabolic processes in the body. And a lot of people have recognized that is important for, circadian rhythm and kind of our biological clocks, but it also is helpful for weight loss. One of the things that helps as a metabolic trigger is light in through the eyes that kind of triggers your body. We're no longer hibernating, it's daytime, and it starts to upregulate all these different things that are very, very helpful for losing weight, among many other things. So getting outside for morning light is key. The other thing I'm a huge proponent of is while you're outside getting the morning light, drinking some water. And I'm big on minerals. So H2O, if you're drinking, reverse osmosis water or, really filtered water, is only part of the equation. We also need all the electrolytes, minerals, and trace elements in the water for it to properly hydrate our cells and for it to have the electrical conductivity for our, different calcium channels and different cell-to-cell communication that takes place. And so I always recommend adding, trace minerals and or electrolytes to that water, especially if you are drinking. If it's a natural spring water, it'll have a lot of these things naturally occurring. But the thing about filtration systems is it's pulling out a lot of, if it's a good filter, it's pulling out a lot of the chemicals, which is great. I'm all for water filters, especially if you're drinking tap water. You need to filter it to some degree because you got fluoride, you got chlorine, you got chloramines, all sorts of constituents in there. But it's also pulling out a lot of the minerals because it doesn't just differentiate between good and bad. It just pulls out all these different particulates and things that are in the water. So you always want to remineralize it if you're drinking, reverse osmosis water. And then so water in the morning, freaking key, man. Again, gets the metabolism going, get your bowels moving, helps with all these things. And a lot of people will just jump straight to coffee or straight to tea. And I'm a huge lover of coffee. In fact, I've tried some of your Peak Performance organic coffee, Tyler, and I've been loving it. Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Those are the quality beans people need to be drinking if they're having a cup of Joe in the morning.
Yeah, and coffee is also one of the most heavily sprayed crops with pesticides.
Yes,
so regardless whether you drink Peak Performance or not, make sure you get an organic coffee at least, right?
Tea is the same way.
So annoying, like Starbucks, like it would be so easy for them to make an organic coffee and just roll that out. But I think I don't know what it is, probably something to do with they're already priced so darn high that if they did organic, people would just complain and probably leave because it'd be $10 a cup or something. But yeah.
That's always baffled me too, because it's not like would be that typical to find some organic. And you think a lot of people are aware of this now, would be, worthwhile for them to pursue that. But I don't go to Starbucks anyways. I'm all about my own quality beans.
So, save a half hour of your day and drink organic coffee at the same time, be more productive and healthier. There you go.
That's right. That's right. But before we get to the coffee, love getting some good hydration in. So morning sunlight hydration, and then doing some sort of a mindfulness practice. I'm a big proponent of breath work. So I teach a lot of my patients what I call energy activation breath work. And it's kind of a modified version of Wim Hof. It's about a 5-minute practice where you're able to just totally light up the dopamine and just get the energy systems fired up. So it's really just gets you in a good headspace. And it forays wonderfully into a nice meditation because it helps to quiet some of the mental chatter. And it just gets you in a really good headspace in 4 or 5 minutes time, which virtually everyone can build into their routine. So the other thing I want to highlight on this, the things I'm outlining, is I'm all about efficiency. I'm not one of these guys that's like, you need a 2-hour morning routine and you got to do this and this and this, because a lot of times you just need to get after it, get to your day, even if you're waking up early, like, one of business mentor I listen to a lot is Alex Ramosi, and he's like, he's kind of shitting on morning routines because he's like, dude, you're just like basically procrastinating. You just need to get to fucking work. And I see that perspective a lot. So I'm all about what can we do in like 10, maybe 15 minutes? It's going to move the needle to where you can just get to work, but you've done a few key core things to really kind of get your body and mind going. So those are the 3 core. Get outside for some morning sunlight while you're doing some breath work, drinking some water. All of those can be stacked together because I'm a big proponent of stacking these different habits. Makes it easier to kind of build it all in from a time perspective, but also they all build on each other. And having that water with minerals while you're getting that near infrared light from the sun in the morning, it really helps to charge up your cells, literally. And so that's kind of the core. Then from there, I am a big fan of, I have a walking work desk, and I'm a big fan of doing some sort of movement in a fasted state, whether that's you get your workout in, whether you go for a walk outside, whether you do some type of yoga or something that's more restorative. I'm a big fan of doing some type of movement, and I like to couple caffeine, especially if weight loss is someone's goal. And coupling coffee with movement is a very effective strategy, because oftentimes people, if you're drinking black coffee, it'll cause a rise in blood sugar. And, that'll oftentimes contribute to the crash later on. But if you couple it with movement, because your muscles are activated, you don't have that same increase in blood glucose for a lot of people. So you get a more steady increase in energy that's more sustained, and you just feel overall better. I mean, it's fantastic. So
Interesting.
that could be going out again, grab a cup of coffee, go out for a walk for 15 or 20 minutes. Could be doing some sort of weight training, some sort of interval training. And that's kind of the second portion. So part A is mindfulness, sunlight, and hydration. Part B, when time permits, beyond that, like kind of 10 minutes, is to do some movement coupled with caffeine, and then capping it off with some cold exposure. I love good like cold shower in the morning, or so, and by then you're kind of gotten the body warmed up, so it's not as brutal to do a quick cold plunge or a cold shower after you've done some movement and gotten some coffee in your system, opposed to first thing in the morning. It can be pretty rough.
Yeah. That's really good stuff. Yeah, a lot of good points there. The water and making sure it's mineralized, right? So I had a reverse osmosis for a long time. And then before I realized, like, hey, wait a minute, all the minerals are being stripped out of here. Like me and my family are drinking dead water with
Yeah,
no
almost
minerals.
distilled water. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, so I bought this, what is it called? Vitalizer Plus, which I don't know. If, now I bought an under sink system, actually, when I was with Ben Greenfield, actually, a couple of weeks ago. Ben Greenfield's father actually has a water system company. And one of the things they make is a stage 2 for the reverse osmosis. So it goes to the reverse osmosis, does the whatever, purifies the water, and then goes to a stage 2 that actually has a copper revitalizer and a remineralizer that revitalizes and remineralizes the water. And so actually I'm getting that installed in the next week or two. So I'm excited to not have to do what I've been doing with this Vitalizer Plus $500 essentially blender with a mineral cube in it, which I was putting my dead reverse osmosis water in this like blender essentially with a mineral cube and blend it for like 9 minutes, and it oxygenates and revitalizes and remineralizes the water. But kind of a pain to always have to keep doing that every time. So
Absolutely.
but those are some great points, because spring water is great, but most of it's coming in a plastic bottle, right? And you don't really want to have plastic in the morning if you can avoid it,
Yeah.
right?
No, that's absolutely right. And also, a lot of people either don't have access to a company where they could get high quality spring water delivered or forage their own. And
Right.
the other factor is cost. Like most companies that are selling quality spring water, it adds up, especially if you got multiple people in the house and you drink a lot of water, and you would like to ideally use it for cooking too. If you're going to steam some vegetables or boil something, you don't want to be using the shitty tap water. You want to be using high quality water. So it really starts that up. That's why I think investing in a good filtration system is absolutely a must for a lot of folks that have the ability to do so. And if you're going to be at your place for a long stretch of time, it's such a great ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I love everything else you said. I try to watch the sunrise most mornings as well. And get that morning sunlight. That's a game changer. Mindfulness. I'm not so much. I like Alex Hormozy and some of the stuff he says. I don't agree. I think again, it's the same thing as health. Everybody's different. I know people who have built many $1 million companies from working late at night, and others who woke up early in the morning and did it.
Yep.
For me to just wake up and grab a cup of coffee and jump straight into work would be miserable. So for me, having some more mindfulness and having that time to really spend visualizing, meditating, breathing, getting sunlight. I'm not in such a rush. Other people might be in a rush. Other people might have to get to work. I'm fortunate, very grateful that I get to work from home and kind of work my own schedule and things of that nature. So I understand people have to adapt to whatever their situation is, and hopefully continue to create the life purposefully that they want.
Couldn't agree more. And I think for literally everyone, having even a 5 or 10 minute routine like what we're talking about, it just makes such a big difference in how you feel, how your body performs, how your mind performs, and just managing a lot of these different processes and pathways in the body. It is one of the best 5 or 10 minutes you could spend. I guess what I meant is a lot of people do get carried away where they're dragging this on for 2-3 hours, and they're doing all sorts of stuff where, I've fallen into this in the past too, because I do have a lot of flexibility in my schedule. And, it just depends on where you're at, but I always like to emphasize that there is always a minimum effective dose. There's always something you could do that
Yeah,
is quick and short and straight to the point, and kind of find, branch things out from there and add to it or subtract to it. But everyone has the ability to spend 10 minutes. And, if you wake up 10 minutes earlier and that's what you got to do, it's well worth it.
exactly.
Than
Yeah.
to just dive into the stress of the day and not have any time for yourself. And then the other factor with some type of movement is a lot of people, by the end of the day, they don't have the energy or motivation to do a workout, to get their training in. So getting it in the morning is very practical and tends to work better for a lot of people, just in the fact that you're just getting it done. Not to mention how much better you feel after for the whole rest of the day. You've
Yeah.
got those boosting endorphins and the hormonal response, and feel like $1,000,000. And so that kind of carries you through the day in just a better mood, a better mental state, and just a higher vibration in every interaction you have and everything you do throughout the workday.
100%, man. Yeah. On days that I try to, even on days where like my off days, I still want to at least get some movement, walking, stretching, something. Otherwise, I
Yep.
could feel a noticeable difference in my mental energy, my physical
Mhm.
energy. So yeah. So let's talk about this. This is a really important topic. Um, so people know, let's assume that someone has the basic knowledge, right? They know not to eat fried foods and processed foods and sugar, and limit alcohol, and do all the, get good sleep, right? um why is it so, and I'm actually, yeah, I'm curious for myself. Like for me, I don't mean to sound like any kind of way about this myself, but for me it's actually actually at this point it's not hard. I should say at this point it's not hard for me to eat super healthy and live a super healthy lifestyle. I think I'm at the point now where maybe this is a part of it, where maybe my gut microbiome actually craves healthy foods rather than unhealthy foods. Like I actually look at super sugary cakes and things like that, and I just like, it disgusts me. I'm like, I'm going to feel
Yeah.
so gross if I eat that. I'm
Yeah.
like disgusted just looking at that cake, which is, I know, the opposite of what many people. So but for speaking in general, for most people, right, even friends that I have that learn a lot about health, but yet they're still drinking 3 Coke Zeros every day, or diet sodas, or they can't, they're constantly cheating, cheat meals and things of that nature. So what is, let's talk a little bit about the psychology behind this. How do you make this more practical for people? How do you get a higher compliance, I guess, in terms of people following through here?
The first step to this is to really have someone disciplined and motivated enough to experience the difference, because experiential, having the difference in, like, you could feel how your body responds to certain foods and how you feel when you're totally dialed in with your nutrition, with your lifestyle, with all these choices throughout the day. It's so much easier to make those good choices when like the consequences you're going to feel if you eat, a super high carb lunch, and then like, hey, in 2 hours I'm going to feel like trash, and my brain's going to be foggy. I'm not going to be able to think straight. My verbal fluency is going to be off. Once you kind of experience those things, it does start to become much easier. And then it's also something that I'm a big fan of, kind of incorporating uh, a deeper purpose to your health journey. So really diving deeper into people's psychology of, like, why do you want to lose weight? Well, maybe some people have some surface level goals, but usually if you really go deeper, a lot of people can anchor themselves to a bigger vision and something that's beyond themselves that they really care deeply about. Like, I want to be around so I can walk my daughter down the aisle, and I want to be around so I can have this impact on the world, or whatever it is for that individual. That's another thing that can really give you a true north and can make it so that it's not just like, really should do this, but I don't really feel like it. When you remind yourself of that, and there's certain different tactics I utilize, putting sticky notes in your office or having certain reminders on your phone that come up. That's a big thing. And then the other thing, I think, what you touched on, Tyler, and why you have had success in long-term sustainability is you want to make these things part of your identity,
Yeah.
where it's not something that you're trying to do or some, short-term plan or program. It's like, I am the type of person that doesn't eat this, processed junk food. I am the type of person that wants to nourish my body to the best of my ability and wants to take care of myself so that I can feel better. So I think it's coming back to a lot of those things, and that can involve a deep dive of really going through with the person and figuring out, what is it that you really want? What's the deeper reason behind this? And then what can we incorporate to really change that mindset, change those identities? And then there's certain practical tips that I found really helpful. work, like Atomic Habits is a great book, James Clear, where he goes through a lot of things that you could kind of sandwich certain habits, and kind of incorporating triggers to help remind you to do certain things. And then incorporating rewards. It can be really helpful at positive rewards, where you don't think of going out for beer and pizza as a reward, but you start to associate that as actually, damaging to your body. And you build in things that you could utilize to celebrate that don't involve destroying your health. And so there's a lot of different things that work for different people, because that's the other thing I've learned is you can't take this one technique and apply it across the whole board, because we all also have different, ideas around that and different things that work that may not work for the next guy. But those are some really foundational strategies to start to make those shifts. And I think the biggest thing I've noticed is just when you have a taste of that quality of life and how much better you could feel, and then you compare it, you're really comparing it. And I tell people this all the time, is feeling lousy and not feeling your best worth a few moments of mouth pleasure? Because food at the end of the day, it ultimately, like, I love good food, but there's a lot of healthy food that tastes good and a lot of processed food that it's ultimately costing you a serious portion of how good you feel day to day, just for this temporary sensation. And then, like you said, a lot of cravings, especially sugar cravings, but this goes across the board for cravings, is typically a result of neurochemical imbalance. And so when you start to make these shifts and you start to realign the neurochemistry, you don't have the same desire or the same pull to do, to indulge on these sweet, sugary desserts or to eat the big basket of fried chicken and French fries, because you don't actually crave it the same way. And it also comes back to our microbiome and different microbes in our gut. So as you start to eat cleaner, you're building momentum and you're actually changing the chemistry in your body to set you up for success. So you don't have to exert as much discipline or willpower. So those are things I've seen work really well and really help a lot of people.
Yeah, that's some great stuff. I love thinking about and talking about the beliefs and identities around health. In fact, I recorded a solo podcast. If anyone wants to go back, changing your belief system and identity around health was literally, I think, the name of the podcast. And it's interesting because that's how I see it. Now, again, I don't like diets where you're just doing some quick thing, right? It's like what you're saying. This is a way of life. This is something you're, I guess, for lack of a better word, I'm addicted to eating good and feeling good. And, it's like changing your belief. For me, like, my identity is, it makes my decisions simple, right? Like the decision for me not to eat cake at one of my daughter's friends' birthday parties or whatever that I go to every weekend, let's say, it's a simple decision because my identity is I don't eat cake.
That's right.
Literally, like, I just don't eat cake. And whatever, if someone wants to have a cheat day once a year, whatever, that's fine. I typically don't even do that because literally I don't eat cake. Like, I just literally don't even have a desire for it. Right. So, and again, maybe that's extreme for some people, but changing that identity. And I wonder your thoughts, like, how much do you think of this goes to like family upbringing stuff, right? And like, just the way that your family cooked for you, or foods that you ate as a kid. Or I know, like, my mother, for example, was literally hammered home in her head, like, you better finish like every piece of food on that plate, no matter what we put on there. And so, like, to this day, she doesn't want to see anyone like not finish their plate. She'll start eating other people's food if they don't finish it. And it's like, wow, like, it's some, so there are some, I guess that's an ingrained belief, right? Or different. What have you seen some of the things that maybe psychologically you've had to break or help people change, maybe around that?
Our programming that we, get as a child during our upbringing absolutely plays a role in this stuff, but it's also not to be, I don't want to dismiss it, but a lot of people almost build it in as an excuse, when at the end of the day, like, I wasn't raised on the healthiest diet. Like, I ate pretty much a standard American diet because my parents didn't know any better. And, they did the best of what they got, but honestly, like, as a family, we couldn't afford to like buy the highest quality food, and they did what they thought was good, but looking back, it was horrendous. And but I've seen people make these changes and shift these things throughout the years, to where I think it's certainly something to address and absolutely plays a role, but it's not, something that you're chained to. It's not your destiny to say, oh, well, my family, my parents are overweight, they have these habits, they caused this in me. And then you kind of build this victim mentality. It's
Yeah,
like,
great point.
and sometimes those things, again, there's two sides to the equation, because you don't want to just like bury, these things. You do want to work through them. And there's a lot of techniques I've found. I absolutely love holotropic breath work for working through past traumas and different subconscious programming. There's all sorts of other therapies and things that people can explore to work through that. But I think at the end of the day, it comes back to like, really, what's your mission? What do you really care the most about? And I think that's something that can really drive a lot of this stuff home for people.
Love that. I love that, man. Um, so let's talk a little bit about, as we start, I know we only have a few minutes left, so I do want to kind of ask you a little bit about your services and some of the things. So for my wife and I'm interested myself, for myself and my wife, to go get a bunch of tests and have you review them and talk to us about them. I was previously doing Inside Tracker, which was just blood tests. The one good thing about it was I could pay a little extra and have a phlebotomist come to my house first thing in the morning. Maybe we could still do that with Quest and LabCorp.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. Cause one time I went and sat in the labs and I was like, oh, wow, this is like a nightmare. I'm like sitting in this waiting room for 2 hours on an empty stomach with like 30 sick people all around me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I highly recommend, if you're getting a blood test, if you can pay the extra $100 to have a phlebotomist come to your house first thing in the morning, because you usually have to do them before you drink or eat anything. It's well worth it. But I didn't really like how Inside Tracker was, giving their recommendations, which I didn't really agree with a lot of their recommendations, like, eat whole grains and things like that, things that seem to be very outdated.
Yep.
So how can people work with you, learn more from you, and maybe go through some testing and help, get your advice on those test results?
Yeah. So anyone that's interested in becoming a patient, you can go to my website, ryankennedyhealth.com. And there's more information as far as the services I offer. I do one-on-one patient consulting. I have some group programs, courses, books, all those sorts of good things, just depending on the level of support you're looking for, and kind of where you're at in your health journey. But for anyone that is looking to work together, I'm always available to hop on a quick call and chat with the individual, because I want to, make sure they're going to be a good fit, because I don't want to work with someone who's not willing and ready to change, because I can't do the work for anyone. And
Right.
everyone hears this and it's like, oh yeah, of course. But a lot of people come in to, whether it's any type of coaching or consulting, with this idea that like, this is just going to be the magic thing that solves all my problems. And you still got to show up. You still got to put in the work. You still got to be motivated and disciplined enough to at least try some of these different things. And then as you build momentum, it does get exponentially easier. And so to answer your question, that's a good place to kind of get started. And that's usually the kind of first step. Is I'll have a quick chat with someone and make sure it's a good fit. I'll explain more about kind of my background, how I work with patients. Typically like to bring people on initially for 3 months, because that really gives us enough time to dial in all these different variables, where we meet for consultations and go through the different strategies and changes we're going to make to their lifestyle. And then in between the consults, I'm big on accountability and support. So really staying in touch day to day to really make sure they're following through, and having someone in your corner that's just someone outside of yourself to keep you externally accountable to a lot of these changes is really important part of the process, especially at the beginning. The accountability is what drives that. And over time, that external accountability turns into an internal habit. And so the example I like to use is like brushing your teeth. A lot of kids are told when they're young, you have to brush your teeth. You have to brush your teeth, and you do it because your parents force you. But no one's forcing you to brush your teeth now, Tyler, but you do it because it's a habit, and you realize like, this is something I need to do. It doesn't require a ton of time or a ton of effort, but it makes a big difference. So my teeth don't fall. I don't have all sorts of horrible dental issues. Same thing goes with your health, with eating healthy meals, with moving your body, with getting good sleep, with, taking any vitamins or targeted supplementation. When you break it down into little bite-sized pieces, none of it's that hard. None of it's that time consuming, but together it makes a massive difference in every single aspect of your life. And so that's I like to bring people through different stages and start slow and attack some of the low-hanging fruit, some of the things that are really going to move the needle for them. And then every time we meet, really adding layers to that, going over labs, seeing what's going to be best for the individual. So that's kind of a broad overview of the process.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. ryankennedyhealth.com. Highly recommend you go there. For me, it's like investing in health is just, and actually this realization came to me by having a lot of kind of thinking time, morning quiet time, meditating, visualizing, thinking about like, what is my highest, what is my biggest goal in life? What do I really, and looking out into the future. And for me, one of the things that drives me is, I have a goal of myself, my wife, and my two daughters all living to over 100 years old. Right. And so
I
that's
love
helping
that.
to drive my decisions. I have a goal of, being able to spend time with my great grandkids. Right. And so these are some of the things, as you were talking earlier about psychologically driving people and helping them connect on a deeper level. Like, I'm in some business groups where some very, very successful and very, very wealthy people. And it's like, man, like, what's the point of having, millions or hundreds of millions of dollars if you pass away at 65 when you could have lived to 95 and been there with your family and grandkids and all that kind of stuff. And so it's always kind of boggled my mind how people will invest so much in other things like investments and business and finance and type stuff, and not invest in their health, which, at Peak Performance we always say a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, but a sick person has
Yeah.
only one.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's, it's the most important thing. So highly recommend you prioritize your health and to have someone hold you accountable, and to do it again, not the old outdated way that in 50 years from now we're going to be looking back like, how did we operate without being tested? Right. So get tested, have someone who knows how to coach you through those tests and those test results, see what you may be deficient in, see how you can, continue to improve that way. And so, yeah, Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'll be in contact with you shortly about myself and my wife getting started with you. And any social media or anything you want people to follow you on, or just the website?
Yeah, I'm fairly active on Instagram, Ryan C. Kennedy, and I share all sorts of things from just nutrition information to healthy recipes to different lifestyle stuff. A lot of stuff we went over today, but just share information there. And then I have a podcast as well, hoping to get you on, Tyler,
Yeah.
the Ryan Kennedy Show. And so those are the best places. And then if anyone wants to reach out, ryankennedyhealth@gmail.com is the best place to send a quick email to get things started. And I just appreciate you having me on, brother. And I appreciate the work that you're doing with your company, because it really does make a big difference. And I think supplementation is a great place for people to start making changes, because it's not that difficult. It doesn't require a lot of discipline. I will admit, adhering to a really healthy diet can be hard for a lot of people. Exercising can be really challenging for a lot of folks. But when you can start to get that baseline up, that natural energy up, and you start to feel better because you're taking some quality vitamins, you're taking some certain supplements that are helping improve your body's underlying function, that can oftentimes be the catalyst for people to then take more serious efforts in some of the foundational stuff that's really, the most important thing at the end of the day. So I appreciate what you're doing there, and really value you having me on, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you sharing your wisdom here with everyone. And yeah, we'll be in touch soon. Thanks for listening. And just a reminder, if you haven't yet tried any of our Peak Performance products, you get 20% off your first order. We have one of the largest selection of USDA certified organic superfood powders, as well as very high quality supplements. And you get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's www.buypeakperformance.com.